April, is there anything I can do to help? We are live. Okay. Great.
Thank you, April. Oh, right. Now I can start the meeting as you can. Committee of the whole work session here at 10:39 on September 21st, 2021. And we have our agenda in front of us here, including the minutes, and then we have presentations both from Southville Village as well as downtown Tofty, having guests representing each. And we also have joining us Bruce Kimmel with the Ellers group on the phone. And unfortunately, Bruce has to leave at 11, and so he was hoping to give a few remarks kind of first thing in the meeting. And Bruce, I think we're ready at this point.
All right, great. And I can see you all via the live stream as well. So, well, thank you, commissioners and county staff. I'm excited to be with you here virtually and to help you with the process of considering these tax abatement proposals in front of you for these exciting projects in Tofty. I just wanted to give a brief overview of our expected role in this process and answer any initial questions you might have. I would really see our involvement taking two tracks. The first would be to work directly with the applicants in reviewing their materials, clarifying any questions we might have, and overall evaluating both the economic viability of the project and the readiness of their projects, as well as verifying the need for the county's financial assistance in the form of tax abatement. And if there is some question as to the appropriate length of abatement participation, we could help the county negotiate those terms and any other details in the abatement agreements with both parties on the county's behalf. So that first track is really about due diligence and confirming the but-for test in terms of the need for tax abatement assistance, and then in helping you negotiate any of those terms of the development agreement and abatement agreement between you and the two respective parties. The second track would really be to help facilitate the actual process of setting up tax abatements to assist the projects, assuming you do want to move forward in helping them. The tax abatement process isn't nearly as onerous as the tax increment financing process, but there are still some steps to take. You may recall some of that process with the Lutzen project several years ago. And so we would just be a resource to your county team in making sure that all of those I's are dotted and T's are crossed in terms of identifying the abatement parcels and going through those steps so that they follow state law. I think that's really what I wanted to cover in terms of an outset, and would welcome any questions you have before you start engaging with the applicants.
Any questions from commissioners? It's early yet.
Okay, and certainly as things arise, please feel free to ask me over the next 20 minutes or so, and then certainly we can have more conversations at future COTWs or county board meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. All right. Any questions for Bruce from you, Rob? Or?
No, thanks.
Okay. Well, I'll hand it over to you then, sir. And this isn't the first we've heard of your project, but it'll be great to get the updates.
Yeah, sounds good. It'll be a little more color to kind of put on the canvas this time around. First, just thanks for the welcome this morning and the inclusion. Really, I'm glad to be here. A lot has progressed, I think, since the last time we spoke. And I think first and foremost is just what's really changed is you've empowered this conversation to take place. And as we'll see through the numbers that I share and present, and maybe in the triggering information, you'll see that the tax abatement policy that you enabled, and with the help of Brady and others, is key to my being able to make this project work and support the workforce housing portion of my project. Thanks, James. Okay. Close enough. my mother would smile that I needed a microphone. She's usually telling me to keep it down. So 3 things just to share today. First is provide a little more context in terms of what Sawbill Village is. Have a chance to talk about some of the financial materials that I provided, and then specifically to lay down my request, which really kind of takes in 2 forms. It's verbal and the air cover support of the board, and then also support specifically through the abatement program. I won't spend a lot of time on some of these slides, but I want to be clear that why I'm here specifically is to become part of the solution set. And the story I've heard and you've heard 100 times about, for those of us not fortunate enough to be grown up in Cook County that have fallen in love with it and have come up to share in it, is a familiar story, but it's something that where I want to maybe expand my involvement to truly address what I have heard and you understand to be one of the top challenges within the country, the county, with the housing component. But there's a parallel for me with the business infrastructure too. I think having opportunities for small business ownership is also important. So this is kind of where we set out and wanted to put something in motion. So as a refresh, Sawbill Village is about a 12,000 square foot multi-use development of finished space on 2 above ground floors. There's an additional 6,000 square foot basement that will be used for storage, office space, and as an extension for some of the businesses. The main floor would comprise of 4 commercial retail spaces, 3 of which dedicated to retail, 1 of which would be outfitted for a restaurant. The upper level would consist of 6 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartments that would be specifically committed for year-round residents of Cook County. The upper floor, actually all 3 floors, would be ADA accessible. I thought I was going to be able to have one of the first elevators in Tofty, but I was told by the Tofty Township 2 weeks ago that I would not. I would have the 2nd elevator in town, but I thought that was a good thing from that. The project is coming in right at the mid-range of what we had expected. Right now we're focused on just under $2.7 million for all in. And I'm really pleased that things are lining up from a construction standpoint, that we believe we can break ground as early as July of next year. Actually, we'll be breaking ground in July next year. And the building would be completed by the end of the year, with the housing units available as January 2023. Why multi-use? This is, and Jenny's probably smiling under her mask, but in the West End, you routinely hear about 2 common needs, and housing is number 1, and the locals want a restaurant. That's number 2. And it's sometimes, I think, lost when I travel to Grand Marais how nice it is to be in Grand Marais, but after 5-6 p.m. on the West End, there's not a lot to do. So I think having another opportunity for dining and just maybe for socialization is kind of address the top 2 there. So having the multi-use seems to be really the best fit for what the voice of the West End of Cook County presented. And I talked to a lot of people, and it's 2 years of just getting to know folks and asking them what's important, and it just aggregated in those two buckets. In terms of the layout, you're probably, you've driven by this, I'm sure, a few hundred times in the course of your living up here, but it's, the lot is located right across the street from the American Inn, diagonal from the Holiday gas station store. I want to be pretty consistent, and this has been kind of a request from my neighbors on my west side, is to try to limit traffic on Tofty Town Park Road, which is the road on the lake side. And so the access point would be fairly exclusive on Highway 61. I also I'm looking forward to, you'll see the main building in blue where the retail and the apartments of, and then there's a separate detached garage, which I'll address in a moment. So my intent is to have a separate detached garage where each apartment owner would at least have one stall of covered parking space. And then with a little outdoor patio that could service the restaurant in the, the usable months. I'm also really interested in creating this kind of locals only kiosk area where small, owners or crafts tradesmen and women who, are unfunded or underfunded for something on a more permanent basis would have ability to come in and be able to sell and share their wares and again create some economy for having a dedicated location to do just that. So this is a mock-up of the apartment, but my philosophy on building workforce housing is really anchored in usability. And I had the chance to spend some time in an apartment a few years ago. I was traveling a lot to Philadelphia, and my employer at the time found it cheaper to rent an apartment as opposed to be in a hotel room. And when you're in an apartment, and maybe if you're living in one now or if you've lived one in one your career, there's kind of some things that come front of mind that are become important. And having some space to support the head count that are under that roof is one aspect. When you want to have friends over or family over, is there space to do that and to aggregate and congregate? Storage is important. And I think especially if you're talking about year-round living on the North Shore, that storage becomes important to take advantage of a lot of the hobbies that we all so much enjoy. So I just, we've tried to focus in terms as we built out the square footage to have a usable footprint that could support not just, one or two roommates, in each bedroom, but if it was a young couple, if it was a small family, especially with Birch Grove Elementary School just being a 2-minute walk from this location, that there's a high element of usability that comes with building this out. All apartment sizes are within a range of 880 to 950 square feet. And I lived in a 900 square foot apartment. So with the additive dedicated storage that they would have in the basement, in addition to the garage, in addition to the pavilion space, which they could use for large aggregation, we felt this was probably the best way to approach the usability factor of living year-round on the North Shore. Okay, any questions on that section in terms of the Sawville Village? Okay. In terms of the economics, learning a lot, and what our project costs came in right at about 2.7, just under 2.7. The mix of this actually is just weighted about 45-55. So as you're probably aware from previous construction projects, building up gets pretty cheap. So to add the second floor where the housing would be is not the expensive portion. The distribution comes in that the retail spaces on the main floor will be constructed to a white finish, meaning that they'll have flooring, walls, tile, ceiling, but it will be up to the individual business owners to finish the space out like you typically would in a commercial space. The cost for the housing really comes is that the expectation for the 6 apartments above, it'll be turnkey. Appliances, and we're going to put in, nice amenities, pendant lighting, granite countertops, luxury vinyl plank flooring, and make these places that everyone would want to live. But the ratio there is about 45-55%, 55 on the housing, 45 on the actual the retail. I don't know if there's any questions in terms that you may have on the breakdown of the summary or what the site utilities, the administrative costs are. One maybe call out is that I actually have on site utilities that is not representative of my septic cost. Our septic estimate is from Scott Robertson and Terra Firma is just under, I think, 60,000. I think it's close to like 56, 57,000, and that's actually tucked under the site and utilities under that upper right block. The 18,000 listed in that mid block is a pre-treatment component, just to be more eco-friendly and to make it a little bit more easier to have a cleaner process of managing the septic. So what's also become, basically, let me just back up one step. Yeah, so with that project cost of 2.7, when I looked at the other aspect, or I guess what I've learned is that the revenue generated from housing rents is diametrically opposed to debt service. And when I was doing my preparation, my research for the project, what was important for me is to try to create a rent level for the apartments that was based on the Cook County Wage Index. There's not a lot of information, so I think 2015 was the last data that I could find that was public. But but the methodology I used when creating rents is I wanted essentially to have that the average Cook County resident earning, the annual wages would not have to spend more than 33% of their gross income toward housing. So that's roughly, it puts me in about $775 per wage earner, or about $1,550 per two-bedroom apartment is the rent. Now, I think the good news is since 2015, it seems like those average incomes probably have crept up. There's not quantitative data to support that, but it seems like things have probably moved up slightly since 2015. But if I try to keep revenues and the housing rents in that range, what happens is I don't generate enough revenue to cover the operating expenses of the project without support. And the two biggest culprits are the property tax estimation on top. My current property taxes now are about $6,000. I would expect that would move to close to $45,000 based on benchmarks in the county. Second largest challenge for me is the debt service, where even after a 25% equity position, I'd have to borrow $2 million at a 4.25% interest note over 25 years. I have to pay $130,000 a year in debt. So between the expanse of debt and the property taxes, those are the top two issues that would challenge revenue created from workforce rental income. Solutions to address that, essentially, to take the operating expense down, I looked at three kind of key components. One is the getting grants to lower the amount of debt that I would have to take out. The second is the tax abatement. And the third was a low interest loan. And the challenge with the low interest loan is, number one, haven't found one. And two, I think the loans are really less attractive because they don't have as much ability to lower the operating expense. There's not a ton of difference between 1% and 2%, 2% and 3%, 2% and 4%. It really becomes a game of trying to lower the total amount that you're borrowing. If I can, what I found is generate a little over $500,000 in grant support and get the tax abatement. If nothing else changes, and instead of borrowing just over $2 million, I'm able to borrow just under $1.5 million, using the same 4.25% interest, the same term of 25 years, and a slightly higher property tax based on making sure that Birch Grove would keep their assessment. I'm actually able to do the project and keep the project in the black. So it became pretty clear that tax abatement and grant support were the top two things that I needed to address. Now, if Bruce is still on the phone, I'll use Bruce to filter some of this information, and I'm not above correction on some of my figures, so I want to make sure I'm trying to put everything out there transparently and we all understand what we're signing on for. The tax abatement period, what I saw was that, and what I'll be requesting is a 20-year period of abatement support. I think the quantitative figure for that would be just about $700,000 of abatement support across that 20 years. And that's the difference in paying, instead of paying $45,000 a year, paying $10,000 a year. There's a couple of reasons that 20-year term was identified, and it's probably most evident in the pro forma. But if I look at where my cash flow and where the operating expenses are going to impact cash flow, there's a negative return in the first 5 years of the project. And in the first 10 years of the project, it's still pretty small. Where the project would have really the ability to put a return on the investment is in the following 10 years. And at the end of 20 years, when I restart paying property tax, the cumulative return on the project would be, I think, just at about 8%.
Rob, could I interrupt briefly?
Please.
Bruce, I see that it's 11 o'clock, and I know you have to go.
Sure.
So is there anything you want to add before you get off the line?
No, not right now. I do have Mr. Dieter's pro forma that Brady had forwarded, and I look forward to rewatching this session and talking further with the county team, and then engaging with Rob on some of his numbers. But I think this was a good start. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Bruce.
Yep. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
One of the benchmarks that I was using, and I'm open to other considerations on this as well, was just according to the National Council of Real Estate Fiduciaries, their average rate of return on a 25-year note is just over 10%. So this project, at least as I have it mapped today, would be slightly under that from a rate of return, but I think that's part of the investment we're making from to put this into housing, not a true commercial pure play building. And one note on the tax abatement is where I understand that the property taxes are kind of segmented in different components. One aspect that would be important to me would be to continue to maintain incremental taxes that would support the Birch Grove Elementary School. All right. So kind of moving on to the second part of just the information is tax abatement becomes important is one of the three legs of the stool. The two others really become the MHFA grant, or Minnesota Housing Financial Authority grant, as well as IRRB. One key note to take away is that on the MHFA grant, any tax abatement support is counted toward the local match requirement that MHFA has. And James, I don't know if you want me to, if it's worthwhile to take time to go into MHFA, or if you're feeling comfortable with kind of the information, or if the commissioners are feeling comfortable with how MHFA works.
I actually had a chance to talk to Sarah Bunn, so she walked through it with me, but it's up to the commissioners if they want to hear more about that.
Thoughts, commissioners?
Oh, I do have some questions, but they're probably more specific than maybe.
This would allow? I think maybe just a Cliff Notes version of MHFA.
Yep.
How it works is they essentially have $4 million of grant funding that they'll appropriate to projects at the end of this year. That $4 million is to cover a 2-year period of investment. And they absolutely support workforce housing projects in communities like Tofte or Cook County, the West End. And what they'll do is they'll basically grant up to 25% of the housing portion of the project. So you recall, out of the $2.7 million project that I have, just over 1.3 million is, 55% of the project is attributed to the housing. Or in a different example I used is, if housing costs 1.6 million, the biggest grant you could get from an MHFA would be 400. The other thing, though, as I mentioned earlier too, is that in order to get that MHFA grant, you have to be able to demonstrate you have a local match of support. So if we're going to ask for 400,000, we'd have to demonstrate 200,000 of locally matched support. And what I've learned is the abatement counts toward that local match support.
The whole life of the abatement?
Correct.
Yep.
Which I didn't have listed correctly in my slides, but I was updated by Mary Somnus and Beth Bross. They gave me that information. So for this process, and I think this will be something that's relevant for both Paul and myself and Dennis and Joe, is that they'll release the RFP. I think Sarah at MHFA is trying to get it out yet this month. Applications should be due in December, and then they'll go through their evaluation period and then announce the awardees to the grants. And what was reassuring to hear from Sarah, and I think this was information that was different than what was initially understood with MHP, is that just dealing with different scenarios, is that if the number of projects submitted to MHFA is higher than the funds they have available, then some projects will go unfunded. But if it's the reverse and there's more funds than there are projects, then it would be likely that all projects would be funded. And then finally, I think if there are multiple projects like coming from one community, in our case, we hope to have 2 projects that go to MHFA, then there's a prioritization exercise that we'll go through. So it's possible that only one project would be funded by MHFA if we're dealing with that first scenario where there's more projects than there are funding. Sarah put an asterisk by that, and she also said there's one difference though, is that if both projects aren't requesting $1 million, then it's possible we could fund the 2 projects if they're asking for a more reasonable amount. So I think that's also reason to be optimistic that we could see 2 projects receive that grant support. Unfortunately, there is no way we'll know how many projects that are going to be nominated.
Do we have historical perspective?
Most years the projects have exceeded the funds available. She didn't get into a quant in terms of like how many years the opposite's been true, but she did cite there have been years when the funds exceeded the number of projects. I am absolutely out of the different scenarios that have been discussed, I think, and back channels of hoping that the county will join the Tofty Township in supporting both projects equally. And I'm hoping that we can also kind of rally some air cover and some campaign with the MHFA to ask them to support both projects, because it's just, I think, such a great opportunity. Frankly, I would hate to miss a chance to not add 20 units of housing in the county and certainly in the West End. I think we've covered this, so I don't want to get in the weeds on that. And I think we've covered this, which is essentially that the tax abatement counts toward the local match. So this is the part, David, that I had incorrect. Initially, I was thinking we would only be able to count 1 year's worth of abatement toward the local match, and that's been corrected. So it looks like the whole amount would be able to be counted. So this is my kind of waterfall of what I'm trying to achieve. One mistake in that lower left box, I have the IRRB grant amount incorrect. It's actually correctly stated on the far right. But if I, in order to make the operating expenses, get them in the black, I need to lower the debt service that I'm borrowing from $2,013,000. I need to get that target closer to about 1.48 million. So the $536,000 in grant support helps me lower the debt service to take out that 4.25% loan for 25 years to make my debt service at a level I can handle. So I would be putting in 25% equity. My loan amount would be just at about 1.48 million. And then if I am successful in getting the MHFA grant of 312,000, IRRB grant for 173, and whether it's the EDA or other locally matched support for an additional 50,000, that's my pathway to get to the 1.48 million of debt service I need to make this project financially viable. You pause there. Is that any questions on that? apologize for not having the slide correctly.
Well, I guess, just how did you determine the IRRB grant amount?
The IRRB and their development infrastructure will only, because it's a multi-use program, will only pay for a small, not a small number, certain components, yeah. So most of that is kind of the carve out for the infrastructure costs that would qualify for IRRB support and funding.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I think just my request today is 1 and 3 are pretty much the same. Is I would be grateful for a letter of support that I can use in my grant fundraising with MHFA and IRRB. That would, allow me to demonstrate that I've, meeting the requirements for having county support in addition to the town support. And then as the petitioning process becomes clear, is that tax abatement support is important to me, again, especially in the first decade, as there really is not much rate of return, but allows a average rate of return of just at or under 8% over the 20-year period that you would provide that abatement. And I'm also recognizing too that providing that abatement is not something I take lightly, and I'm grateful for the support you would put in. If in some way I'm able to pay that project off earlier and that debt service goes away, I would expect to then transition to paying for the full property tax amount, because I would frankly no longer need that in the window of time. So I think that's language we can work out as we work with Bruce and get to that point, so that the debt service is really utilized what it's intended for, to initiate the project, but it's not a crutch of profitability. Just a quick status of where we're at. Equity secured, the financing is secured. I've got my contractor locked in, although IRRB is asking for me to, I think, get a couple more bids. So I'm gonna open it up to see if there's any dark horse, sea biscuits out there that will upend Shingleby. But the geotech survey is complete. I know where my rock is. Civil engineering survey will be completed in October. And then we've done all the tests for utilities. We've got an artesian well on the property that has the flow. Don McKeever did all the testing. The state of Minnesota has validated it can be used for commercial use. Septic's identified, the ground's been tested. I'll want that validated by the county. I want to make sure that the county septic inspector also has confidence that we're doing things the appropriate way. And then the design plans essentially are maybe just will be finalized based on the outcome of this. And it's, the question is it going to be 6 2-bedroom workforce housing apartments? But if I can't get the support, I'll tell you, it'll be a tough day for me, because I've been working on this for 6 years. We'll still probably end up putting the project, but I would have to put something on that second floor that would generate better cash flow to maintain the higher debt cost. Time frame, I think we covered this. So really my goal is to have the housing open January 23, and then that in those winter months give the small business owners the opportunity to build out their spaces so that they would be ready for the 23 tourist season. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner
Thank
Schiller.
you. Mr. Dieter came before the supervisors in Tofte and gave a great presentation, just like today. Do you want more letters of support from the West End? We have 2 other townships.
I'd be grateful. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it all matters, and I would advocate, Jenny, too, that if they could almost make 2 copies.
Mhm.
And I need one for Sawbill Village, but I would also advocate for having one for the Bluefin project as well. I'm not altruistic in my approach, but I do think that we need one project to go through, period. And I think the more support we have on MHFA and the more vocalization we can about rallying the community around the projects would give us a better opportunity to get both. I'm a veteran. I spent 4 years active duty in the Army, so I know that's going to help with some of the scoring process. But I do think any angle that we can possibly play to get support of both projects is important.
Okay, so I do go to the township meetings, so I'll talk to Schroeder and Lutzen also.
That'd be great. And if you need me to join, I'd be happy to
Okay,
present for those as well.
great.
So, Rob, thanks for your presentation this morning. One question that I know will come up is the issue of how we can be sure that this will remain workforce housing for some period, if not indefinitely, and I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
I think that's such an important component as well, and I would be willing to contractually write that in. I think if we're, MHFA requires it. You can't hold back any, housing of the units that MHA funds are going for. But the whole point of doing this is back for the community. So putting it in writing for me or putting it as part of a contract for me is insignificant, because if I wanted to go a different way, I absolutely would.
Mhm. And I guess I should add too, it's not just workforce housing that we need housing for seniors as well. And so I think there's probably more conversation we want to have about how we describe that, if it appears in the contract.
Yep, I think it's fair.
Any questions from this side of the table?
Just comment, appreciate you making them, accessible for folks, because I think that does start to get to, places that you can actually age in as you're, going through it, and it just opens it up to a broader part of our communities for that. I also appreciate that you didn't link it specifically to you have to be employed here to have one of those houses, employed at one of those facilities there. So, yeah, those were key aspects in your presentation today.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying with the septic. Having these two projects side by side to read, it made me think, how come yours is so little? That doesn't make any sense. So thank you for clarifying that. Couple probably weird ones.
No, go.
Parking spaces per development code are local county development code, or is that the Tofty development code?
So I have two. We have two codes that we have to abide by, the county, and then it's interesting. Tofty has its own kind of design requirements. So maintaining kind of the requirements of the Norwegian fishing village image that it presents. So in terms of the functional codes, I'll defer to county and state. It's more of the design codes that Tofty has in terms of the exterior and appearance of the building.
And is that the top? It says Tofty Design Review Board. I didn't even know there was one.
That's,
So
yeah.
is there, have they met? Have they reviewed your plan?
The Tofty Township has reviewed it, and the Tofty Township plus, I think, maybe the county administrator, or maybe one person, maybe it's the county commissioner, is involved with that. And then I think they invite 2 Tofty citizens at large to review the plans and the design. So that block has not been checked yet, as I haven't gotten to the exterior component, but I am well aware of the details that they've outlined. And I think the last time, Stacy, that they met probably was, as the Sawtooth Outfitters there was built. I think their building was designed that way, and where the coho on the water's edge, it was, again, kind of that same fishing village image that they're looking for. So.
And so how many parking spaces does our code say you need?
I can't remember the ratio, and the restaurant adds a little bit of additional support. I want to say, we're probably going to be in the span of, it's got to be 50 parking spots, 50, 60, but I'd go back and research to figure out how much of that space we would need to lay out. The coho has been actually a good benchmark for me. Their building's about the same length, but maybe not quite as deep as what we'll be building.
Okay. I just was wondering how many spaces you had to have outside if you have a garage, and maybe we should eliminate the outside. If you have a garage, you wouldn't really need to
For the housing,
That's perfect.
yeah, and I'm kind of thinking of it, it's a great call out, in two paradigms, in that for the workforce housing, having the garage is just dedicated for them. In terms of more of the transient visitors that would be coming in for the retail spaces in the restaurant, that I think is where the county code is specific in terms of how many spaces you have to have available.
I'm just curious about that. So your $35,000 abatement that you're asking for every year, have you run that through the assessor's office to say this is the portion that would be commercial and this is the portion that would be residential and what those rates would be?
We did an early kind of straw test with Bob, Assessor Thompson, earlier in the spring, and his initial kind of figures, and I think Brady was kind of helped do a scan of that. So Assessor Thompson has had kind of eyes on it. I think as we look at different benchmarks, we're going to continue to triangulate what that figure would be. But in terms of the abatement where I'm at today, is probably more important today in terms of freezing where I'm at as opposed to where I'm going to be in 20 years, if that makes sense.
Well, I was just wondering, as far as, some things we don't get to say we can abate that.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering where that is, if this even makes sense, and how much is gonna go to the state anyway. Wasn't state general tax, they get their money, right? So we don't get to abate that, and I'm wondering
What the breakdowns, the segments are.
what the
Yeah.
breakdown is.
I can get that information for you.
And then, I guess I do have a concern. I understand your rationale for the restaurant and business. I think that would be exciting for Tofty to have. I have reservations about tax abatement on commercial properties.
Mm-hmm.
For housing, my mind can go there much easier. So that's where I'd like to see the breakdown.
Sure.
Can you make this work without an abatement on commercial portion of this or not?
I think that's fair. And if there are ways that, and I think this is part of having the numbers out in a transparent manner for us to be able to put those figures through to the test. And I don't take for granted using and requesting those tax abatement dollars. And so important to me is that it doesn't cost Cook County anything from present state, so there's not any outlay for present. But I do think if there are ways that we can review that information and find ways to make the project financially viable and minimize the county investment, I'm in support of that. So it sounds like providing that information would help us to take a look at a more granular level where any efficiencies could be gained. So I support it. What I know for a fact, though, is that some level of abatement will be needed based on turning up the stones through it that I've tried to pursue the last couple of years to make the workforce housing portion of this work. So I think the best that I could hope for is that we put the information forward, and if there are other ideas in terms of how to do it more economically, I'm open to working with you on that.
And I guess I'm curious about more of your concern. Are you kind of thinking like it's harder to justify an abatement for commercial space? Is that kind of where or like just as far as our needs
yes,
are? Yeah.
And I think it's kind of exciting we have two projects right now. But there are other projects in the works.
Mm-hmm. I hope so.
Yes,
Well,
and they're just not as far along here, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, but when is that point gonna say, well, I realize the abatement number is pretty huge, but I just wanna make sure that I'm not thinking about something just because it's right in front of me today and
Yeah.
not thinking about what's down the road.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there are projects that don't include commercial. So, makes me think,
Yeah.
well, if
Right.
I could, and asking the MHFA for money, well, I don't know. Does that mean nobody else gets on that list in the next year?
No, I think it's
I don't know.
I think it's
It's
per,
annual.
yeah, it's per
Yeah.
year, but, I think I was following what you were saying, and so in my mind, how it worked, it's like, okay, and I think Mr. Dieter pointed this out, is if the
HFA.
MHFA does not go through, then or an abatement does not go through, say, the alternative is to take the housing and turn it into commercial to help with that cash flow. Kinda, I think where you were going is with your, with the commercial abatement being maybe less appealing, you know, if, for argument's sake, the whole lower level was housing, well, the abatement would have to be much larger then to make that project work. So it's almost, you know, a horse apiece of what, and I think the West End's needs are, I mean, I don't live down, I did when I first moved here, live down there, and I have worked down there significantly while I've lived here, but I think the commercial needs are significant down there, and just that retail space or even restaurant space is for real, that need. And so in my mind, it's like, well, yes, we have this very strong, everyone agrees housing issue, and that's easy to support. And then, you know, getting into both the numbers, I think would be helpful on the commercial, but then also just the need, I think is demonstrated, just kind of getting that feel. But alternatively, we could offer no abatement, and then the whole upstairs can be commercial, you know, like, so it's kind of, we're trying to walk a line here and trying to find that happy place, but probably to your point, getting those numbers is gonna help us determine that happy place.
Clear.
Commissioner Swanson?
Yeah, I look at it too, because of the cost of development in our area. The commercial piece is a trade-off to make it viable. And so in the end, I think great discussion, great forum for the committee of the whole, because it's a working session, just no decisions being made, just talking through. For me personally, I fully understand the commercial piece, because that commercial piece is what's allowing us to get that workforce piece to go through. I think our decisions that we're going to end up making, looking at this personally, the way I see it, is once we have this laid out in front of us, we look at how much abatement versus how much do we get for that in the area of housing, and at what cost from the county's ability overall to manage our businesses, manage our business without those additional taxes. Because of course, if these don't go through, you don't get those taxes anyway. That raise in the tax base. So I think that's, in my mind, that's where this starts to gel down to, is in making a decision, how you get there. And to me, I guess I was looking at it, I see your point, right? There can be criticism as to, well, you're also, promoting by giving the abatement to these business aspects that are going in there. But to me, that's a cost of getting this developed housing. So then if you were to strip out that piece and say, all right, what would it cost me to go generate this many housing units in our county if I was just starting with, the land here and I had to go after it? What's the cost, right? And you look at that, 700,000 there, 700,000 there, 1.4 million. And then look at the number of units you're getting, and I we'll see when we get to that bottom end, but I think it's going to end up being a pretty good deal to come up with that much housing, and also give those communities some new business opportunities, which jobs are always something that's a big deal to me as well.
I follow.
And we're so close to HRA,
Yeah.
It's just like,
I
if
know.
we could just move all this, a little faster together. We have, we're gonna hire someone who will direct that and form a committee, board on that, and it's just like, it's just.
It'd been great if they
Yeah.
could, if somebody was there and they could tell us, yeah, this is
Right.
the plan, go forth and do good, but we're afraid, we're unfortunately, we're being presented with that opportunity, or fortunately, we're being
We are.
provided the opportunity. I
Yeah.
don't want to take anything away from all the hard work, because you've certainly done a lot of hard work to get it to this point.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say I really appreciate Commissioner Hawkins' perspective on sort of the overall abatement capacity and how that informs decisions that we make now versus those we might make in 3 years. Because fixing the housing problem is a long-term proposition. And, you know, it may be that we never get close to reaching our capacity, but it's still important to keep that in mind. Because I believe and I hope that we're going to see a lot more proposals involving new housing, and just want to make sure that we have enough capacity to fully consider those down the road.
Yeah, when I was on the city council, there was a developer just kind of shooting from the hip and talking about tax abatement, and at the time I had no idea what he was talking about, and just now not interested in now learning more. It's like, okay, this is a very excellent tool, and just how you navigate it, but recognizing the limitations too, I think is really important. But yeah, thank you for taking time and 6 years. Thank you for taking 6 years to develop.
Yeah, that's slowly but surely, but I'll look to follow up with you, Commissioner Hawkins, on the information, and we can use that for further evaluation and consideration.
I'm sorry, I thought of one more thing.
Sure.
So the other presentation that's next has lots of documents. That was a little overwhelming to me, it's way over my head. But the stormwater one jumped out at me. So have you done a stormwater, assessment or whatever?
That's part of the civil engineering study that'll be
Okay,
completed
that's what
this
that
month.
is. Okay.
I did benefit, though, from being able to see kind of some of the previous documentation that existed from the previous owner. You know, her intent was to build a commercial destination wedding center, and she had actually put quite a bit of investment into managing the water runoff to meet the code. So the good news is for our development is not much has changed since her initial investment on the topography.
that's
So
good.
yeah, so
Yay.
we think that's a good one. Yep, should win.
So one more point that should be made is that in order for the abatement request to be voted upon by the board, there needs to be a public hearing. And so we will need to schedule that. And given the timeline, the application, the grant application to MHFA will be due in November, and we're now looking at the end of September, so time is getting short. So we'll need to think about how quickly we want to notice that public hearing so that we can keep things on a timeline. And of course, this is also pending review by Ellers and making sure that the numbers add up from the county's perspective. So I just want to point that out, that that's part of the process.
As far as order of operations are concerned, like Eller's evaluation and the public hearing, how do they need to line up exactly?
Well, I mean, ideally, and I don't know where Bruce is in being able to like provide a full assessment of both proposals. Brady, did you discuss that with him?
No, but I'm sure that we'll need any scheduling,
So we have, obviously, so if we don't like approve setting a public hearing date, and we can't actually today because it's committee of the whole, right? So, so we'd have to do that at the September 28th meeting. So, and then we could publish it on October 2nd, correct? That's Saturday.
Yeah, that's a Saturday, the 5th.
Right.
12th is the next.
Saturday is the second, so
Yeah.
we put it in that paper
Yeah.
then 2 weeks later.
2 weeks later, so,
Then it'd be, then it'd have to be the 26th if you put it in the second, if you want 2 weeks, that goes to the
Most places
16th.
are 10 days.
Mhm.
10 days?
Most public, yeah. There may be exceptions, but that's the general rule.
You could do it October 12th then.
Mhm. So I guess that's something that we need to nail down in terms of whether we're having the hearing the day of that board meeting.
Ken,
Okay,
we probably need to.
Okay.
That's- yeah, Commissioner.
Sorry, I didn't review our policy that we passed, but in that, don't these groups have to make a formal application, pay a fee?
They
Then it
do.
goes to Ellers, then it comes back to us?
they do,
Okay,
correct.
so
So that's,
so Ellers will review it, I was assuming before our public meeting. Am I not
what
following
we're
correctly?
discussing.
That's what- you're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that makes.
First time for all of us.
Okay,
They're actively reviewing. what they
okay,
have.
so, that's right, I thought maybe it hadn't happened yet.
Mhm.
Okay,
yeah. So a lot of things are moving in parallel
all right.
tracks.
And we're forming the HRA.
Right.
I'm sorry, what you?
No, I said as they should.
Oh,
Actually,
yeah,
in a
yeah.
project like this, you gotta be able to move things in parallel. If you stack them all up, it'll be sometime in a couple of years. So
Yeah.
seriously, I mean,
You've
that's
already
just,
spent.
on projects like this, you have to have the capacity to split them out, move them in parallel if you wanna make progress.
Right, yeah. All right.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
For those sequential sleepers, I know that challenges you.
Yep,
That's how these things are done.
yeah,
Mr. Chair, can we take a short break?
please, yes.
Okay.
Well,
Short break and then.
Do you need a break? Yes, I'm just.
yeah, make yourself comfortable, or, yeah, you'll be back in a flash here.
Good discussion.
Yes.
Sorry, I got lost there for a
No,
minute.
no, that's
I was
okay.
like-
It's a great question, because that's exactly, but we really are, and particularly with the time limitations on this. I mean, if you don't split them up, run them in parallel, there's no way
Yeah.
that this ends up being an extra year thing completely, you know, if we don't try to do that. But you're right, all of those pieces, we need to set it up in some kind of a checklist here of what things have to be done and in what time frame. And if that means you call the horse and say, hey, chop chop, we need to.
Yeah.
But it is interesting, and a lot of good discussion, I think, with, you know, if you say, I'm gonna give up this much on, you know, on the taxes, they just understand what you're paying. And to me, you know, because like when you looked at the one in the housing units, all that, you're like, it's a pretty steep price, although developing them here, would you spend more than you know, if we as a county said, we're gonna put money in this, we're never gonna go just, I don't see us going and developing it all by ourselves. You know, but how much you want to put in for right, exactly. Yep. So it'll be interesting.
And I don't know that you want to, HRA.
The ability to, then you go through stuff your staff to make it, to facilitate it, and where's that? Where it all makes That's my view.
So getting ready to.
I'm done. I mean, I baked my buck and I opened her morning.
2 minutes ago, I found out Kansas City 3 minutes ago.
I kind of slept in the stand this morning. It was like a calm, quiet, farm sunrise. Not even squirrels were moving around.
Yeah, exactly. They're not gonna take my.
You found something out there in the woods?
Oh, I found a lot of.
Wow. Are there quite a few across the road?
No,
Yeah, it's awesome.
I mean, there's always.
We're dealing with,
The young, I had a couple on Sunday, I just thought, I should have. Is that too young? They had just got their feathers. Yeah, no fear of people at all. They're just like standing there looking at me and I'm like, oh, I can't do this.
This guy on this,
It'll be later on.
So you sit there.
That's not listed, and, but it doesn't say who the alternate is. And neither of them could tell me.
What? No, I said, I just wasn't gonna.
He's pretty sure.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna sign it in blood.
I'm pretty sure the shark's no funny to me. Right. It's, northeast wing I know you are at Jimmy, but it doesn't sound like it. The website doesn't say.
Oh, I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure, deja vu.
There it is.
We're gonna just have to watch the recording.
Oh, no. I think you sent, did you have like a PDF or something you sent out to the Yes, ma'am.
So when Sarah and Jeff then, we did the building.
They're sure you were gonna yesterday and say, you know, maybe it was last year. Oh, yeah. Okay, you were right, Dave.
For once.
Yeah, pretty sure we're counted for something this time.
I just play it safe,
Everything's there.
Yeah, all of it is required now.
I suppose if none of them.
You don't know what you're looking at.
I guess it's
Yeah. That's what
Well, you
Yeah,
guys
yeah,
can try
yeah.
to actually do a project.
I just like. No, I file all my now. So what, so how many are you up now in the, have you taken any?
Yeah.
Yeah? Oh, good.
My girls and lovers.
Taking an experience.
All
right.
Yeah.
Thank you for the break.
Indeed.
Of course, thanks for asking. I needed it too, I just did it. All right. Well, and I guess we are ready to resume our September 21st, 2021 Committee of the Whole discussion. And we're moving on to item B, the downtown Tofty building presentation with Mr. Paul Ricky.
Very good.
Thank you for being here this morning.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh, and we can go around, I guess, introduce ourselves. I
Perfect.
hadn't met you before, so my name's Dave Mills. I'm the current board chair, commissioner for District 3, which is west side of Grand Marais, basically.
Very good.
Cascade.
Good morning.
That's a good question. We'll go this way.
Oh, okay. I'm Virginia Storley. I live in Lutzen, formerly in Tofty.
Very good. Good morning.
And Ann Sullivan, District 4 Commissioner, so kind of Gunflint Trail, County Road 60 in there.
Very good. Good morning.
Green cars, Cook County Auditor.
Nice to meet you officially.
Stacy Hawkins, District 2, Grand Marais.
Good morning.
And I'm Bob Swallowson, District 1, Kimball Creek, up to the border.
Okay. Good morning. Take her away.
Yes, please, sir.
So really, thank you for this opportunity to talk and to meet you and to share more information about the Downtown Tofty project. The discussion that we're going to have is probably the most important. Commissioner talked about the amount of information that was shared in your packet, and it's extensive. As Commissioner also said, is that doing one of these projects generates lots of involvement and lots of documentation. And the needs are significant, and the ability to achieve those needs has to be met and demonstrated. So I'm going to concentrate on just a couple of pieces of all that information, which I think will help inform you and lead to the discussion about our conditional use permit update, and then also our request for consideration of tax abatement. So my name is Paul Renke. I'm the president of a company called Silver Oak Development, headquartered in my home office in Oakdale, just on the northeast part of the Twin Cities. I've been in the business of real estate in some way or other for over 34 years, I think, ranging from contractor, Ryan Construction, starting in Hibbing, as a project manager, and moving towards a corporate real estate position with American Express, helping set up offices around the country, to a private developer for 16 years. What started out to be a 6-month, let's try this, ended up to be a 16-year adventure and tremendous learning, learning opportunity that moved to a desire to see what I learned if I could do it myself. So I asked Gene Hoagland, my boss at the time, and the owner of the company, if he would support me on my own company, which is Silver Oak Development. Fast forward 8 years, and I get to work with really talented people. And one of the things I am at with my career, I get to work with people who are thoughtful, capitalized, nice, smart, and they just have good projects. I don't need to work with everybody. So to be able to work with Joe Swanson, the owner of Bluefin Bay, and his partner Parasu, has been terrific, and I've been working for them since spring, since early part of this year. The types of things I've been able to do range from apartment houses in Bismarck, where as owner's rep and construction manager, to apartment houses in Rochester, to medical office buildings in Edina, to a big box warehouse in Shakopee, and so it's really been the gamut. One of the most enlightening and challenging at the time was a psychiatric hospital for adolescents in Brooklyn Center. And so the company I was working for, IRET, was the ownership, Prairie Care was the provider, and we ended up being able to provide a facility for 55 inpatient beds and a significant outpatient clinical service. Neat factor is, wow, all the services are available. Sad factor is the number of people who need services. So that was a large awakening. With this project, all of you know Dennis Rickstall. He greets you. He might be watching on Zoom or on YouTube. He's currently in Greece. So he wishes he could be here, and he's also having an enjoyable time in his vacation.
Well, I hope he's sleeping then, I think, time change.
He might be going to bed here shortly, but knowing Dennis. And then Joe Swanson, who purchased the resort from Dennis, also wishes he could be here and sends his greetings. So I'm here, and it's great to be here. Thank you. And it's really to request the two things, the conditional use permit approvals and support, and then also the approve the request for our tax abatement, the county's share of the incremental portion of the tax abatement. In the packet, there should have been something like this that you had that just shows the project and lays out the elevations and then also the floor plans. If anybody needs one, I've got about 4 or 5 copies here that are available. So the project itself is located in Tofte on the inland side of 61 between American and Sawtooth Outfitters. Total site is about 17.2 acres, and the commercial portion of this is about 6.2. It's also, as you picture it, it's right across the street from the post office of the Bluefin. The goal is to construct the 2 buildings. One smaller building, roughly 9,000 feet, which would be parallel with 61. Commercial retail on the first level, workforce housing apartments on the second level, and then a second building that's perpendicular to 61, which is a little bit larger at about 10,008. That building will have the 2 units of accessible housing, and then the rest of it will be 3 units of retail. Totally, the project is just slightly over $5 million. And all of the apartments slated and planned for this project, the apartments in both buildings are going to be available to all residents of Cook County. I heard County Administrator's question about that potential, and that not only, as Rob shared, is it a requirement of MHFA, which we will be glad to memorialize in the documentation should we be successful with the abatement support request. Let's see, our anticipated construction schedule. The way that I've been phrasing it is the day after Memorial Day 22, we're in the ground starting or clearing trees. 9 to 10 months later, the contractors have said that they believe they can be complete. So that'd be early 2023. Now, thankfully, the demand for housing is so high because opening an apartment complex, in the dead of winter isn't the best way to go. However, we think it's going to be just fine with the advanced marketing that we'll be able to do. The site itself includes the 2 buildings, of course, and then all the paved parking lots and driveway areas. It includes the water and sewer systems. The apartment rents will be gross rents, so that means that it'll be the apartment cost, water, sewer, electric, gas, and internet in those monthly rates. It also includes a stormwater system. In this case, and maybe you caught it in some of the documentation, this will be a detention system with 2 tanks buried beneath the parking areas. The goal, pure and simple, is to control the rate of that flow and to make sure the sedimentation is not contributing to problems downstream. The look, it was mentioned earlier with the Tofte design review process, the desire for it to be the Scandinavian, Norwegian flair and the design elements that connotates. I appreciated that the guidelines in the application was clear that, we're not asking for it to be everybody the same, but we want those design elements to invoke that type of a Norwegian, Scandinavian village. Steeper roofs, some board and batten, color attributes, and I think we've done that. Apartment rates, rental rates. Really, it's about the $975 a month for a 1-bedroom, $1375 a month for a 2-bedroom, and then $1575 a month for the 3. Going back to that market rate housing study that was done in 2015, let's see, that 30% of the gross, that's a real number, but it sure is important to try to either achieve that or hit below it. Back in 15, the thought was that the Tofte median income was around $61,000, just slightly above that. And at that time, the correlation was about $1,490 a month for the affordable family income. It also correlates, our projected rental rates correlate well with the 4 Directions project in Lutzen. Currently, that is running at about $900 a month for a 1-bedroom and $1,250 a month for the 2. Any questions so far? So, tremendous amount of work has been done. And so I'm going to do the run through, which is important to our process of going and talking with the MHFA folks, completing that application, and demonstrating that we're ready to move forward with this project, and that it's a viable and very, what's the word? Just viable project. What we've done is, so far the conditional use permit and application has been submitted. We've achieved the green space that is in excess of the county requirements. We've designed and priced the new septic system, which has received that positive nod from Mitch at the county. The stormwater sewer system, or the stormwater system, has been designed and meets county requirements. We've applied for and received the driveway access permit required by MnDOT. We've there's this thing called the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, the Stormwater PPP. Critical piece that while we're doing construction, we're not adding to the issues that stormwater, like last night, would generate and cause issues to. So we've developed that plan, submitted the application, and paid the fee to the state. We've also completed the grade and fill permit. So we developed that. We also submitted that and paid the fee to the county. The soil borings, soil is crazy, and the outcroppings of rock. So what we've done to date is that we've done the test pits, which we utilized for the design of the sewer system, septic system, and what we found there led us to moving forward with the assumptions we gave to the excavator and the earthwork guy, and American Engineering Testing is engaged, and they should be completing their formal soil borings and giving us the geotech reports yet this month. We might not get the report this month, but we'll have the soil borings done. We've also then competitively bid the general contractors. You saw maybe in some of our documentation a history of dollars. What we thought it was, we updated it, and then currently there's the current cost highlighted in yellow. And that came from this competition that we had, and it was Johnson Wilson out of Duluth, Gardner Builders out of Duluth, and Krause Anderson out of Duluth. I chose those three people specifically, or three firms, because of their experience, on the North Shore, but also with this thing called design build. So, or design assist. The mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire sprinkler are all going to be performance-based designs. So yes, they will definitely meet the state requirements, but I don't have to go out and hire the engineer to do the final wiring diagrams, say in electrical, because if I give the performance requirements of what we need for the building, and then they match that with the state requirements, and then the elements that help this become a highly attractive and a nuanced place to live, the outlet and the soffit for the Christmas lights, the convenience plugs around the building for taking care of business and taking care of the maintenance aspects, those type of things. So each of these three contractors had that ability, and at the end of the day, we chose to work with Johnson Wilson, Shane Johnson down there, and we're really pleased. The numbers that you see in your packet then reflect those current construction costs. We've also engaged a Duluth-based architect. The drawings that you've seen here are, you'll see a name on there called Solid Ground. That was a firm that we engaged. They were located in Ramsey, down in the cities, to do the conceptual drawings. I've engaged a firm called Architectural Advantage from Duluth to take the concept drawings, ensure they meet the codes in the from ADA and also the building codes, and then take those into working drawings. And then we've also engaged with them a structural engineer named Northland Consulting Engineers. A couple more things we've made some progress on, and one is that the Tofty design review application. It has been completed, it has been submitted, and we've paid the fee to the county. And then I'm looking forward to that conversation. And I sometimes get my names, I forget. So Dennis had a chance. Is it Scott that's on the Tofty design board? Like a Scott Bond, possibly?
The name is Scott?
Yeah.
Yeah, what is his last name?
I just don't quite remember. But Dennis had a chance to talk with him on a casual basis prior to his leaving the country. And the message that Dennis heard was he was open to, excited about it, open to talking further about it, and very willing to lay out the expectations around ornamentation and details to ensure that this project complies from the aesthetic point of view. What else? There's also the Tofty Town Board support for the project. So, questions? or wonderments?
Yeah, I don't have any questions, I guess. Not yet, anyways, but
Okay.
oftentimes other commissioners will trigger something. Does anyone have any? Commissioner Hopkins, are you?
Well, yes, I do, but I'm willing to wait until we get to.
No.
Well, we got all the numbers coming.
That's where my questions lie, so
Yeah.
I'll wait until.
Okay.
10-4.
I think, yeah, that's probably something else on here. but-
I did not see the architectural drawings in our packet, unfortunately. So maybe I missed that.
I think we uploaded
We saw
everything that we
them.
received.
We did.
Yeah. we did see that.
Chair, that's not the complete set of drawings, but it shows the exterior elevations and the
Okay,
site plan.
I have seen that before, yeah, just not in this particular.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, I'm going to go to an interview. It's just starting right now. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Brady.
Thank you, Brady.
I hope you do well, Brady.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, I'm just, same question about parking spaces. Now, did yours meet our development plan or whatever said we needed to have parking spaces for?
Yes. And if you ask me the detail about how many and what the ratio is, I
You
can't.
don't know. It's okay.
But I want to be clear
You don't
that.
have garages, so.
No, but this whole center space is blanked out in your drawings for the dimensions, but this whole center space is also parking both ways.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, okay.
So it's adequate parking both for the retail per code, and the architect told me it was uniform building code, and also he looked at the county standards and assured us that that was covered both, so the apartment, residences, and the retail.
These guys don't get a go
Yeah, and that's,
Right.
I see.
No other questions?
But you do have more apartments, so.
Refresh my memory on how many retail would be available.
6, up to 6. So I recently sent a updated conditional use permit application, and the clarity around that was just the wonderment. Originally, Dennis had submitted that with 12 units. Shortly after that got submitted, we realized that we hadn't done a good enough job about the accessible nature of the units. So we took out one retail space on the main level of the bigger building, the one that's perpendicular, and put 2 accessible units on that first floor. So it became 6 total, 3 and 3, and then 14 units in the 14 units of apartments between the 2 buildings, 6 and 8. It's a mixture of the 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments, and it's this notion around, in fact, like Rob stated, people want to live. They just don't want a place to sleep. They want to live, and there's families involved with all the businesses and the needs here in Cook County. So we think that mix is appropriate.
Is there any further thoughts on the types of businesses in this?
Yeah, the 2 that are most current are, there's the attractive spaces that have the Highway 61 access and visibility. And then there's 2 that are tucked back a little bit in the larger building. So the larger building, the perpendicular building, there's 2 spaces that probably will become used and rented by Bluefin Bay Resort. Right now, the operation for the facilities guys and the maintenance guys are sitting on top of each other and in totally inappropriate space, and it's almost basement space with all the drawings and all the clutter. So that's one element that is contemplated moving over there. And then the other one is most likely general business administration over there, which is also sorely needed from where they're currently conducting business. And he chose those 2 as the potentials because they're the least desirable.
Okay.
It's best to get them out of the basement. You have a very hard rain. Guess where the water goes?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Should we move into some numbers? And the numbers, the most critical attachment that was in your packet was the one that had this information, which is really the operating pro forma for 16 years is where we did it. And there's several things just on the format of this. The top couple of lines deals with the revenue, and then the rest of it deals with the expenses. Because we have the split between the housing and the commercial, we have the first three columns has that split. In our conversations with Sarah at MHFA in the early days of setting this up, she recommended that we use the existing 2020 application forms because the 21 hasn't been done yet. And then B, she said that our suggested split of 70-30, 70 housing, 30 commercial, seemed to make sense and would be supported. So that's what we've done in this operating spread, so that the housing has 70% of the expenses and costs, commercial 30, for a total in the third column. So here's the housing retail for a total.
Okay.
And then going forward, it's only the total. Otherwise, it got really messy. We started, but it got really messy.
All right, that's why I got this confused.
The other thing on this too is that we anticipate that we're planning for, from a financial basis, that we are using a 5% vacancy for the housing and a 10% vacancy for the commercial. And in reality, think about that, 10% of commercial being vacant, well, it doesn't really work because I don't have it broken down that way. But from a financial planning point of view, that's what that's all about. Likewise with the residential vacancy. You see as we work down that the net income in the housing category, could you scroll down? So this number right here is the number, the net income. Let me go over this thing. Here's the total net income without consideration or granting of a tax abatement. So again, our tax abatement request deals with the incremental portion of the county's share of the taxes payable on this project. When that's taken into account, we come into still a negative $7,600 on an annual basis. But by the fourth year, we get the positive nature, or the positive basis of the cash analysis. This also assumes that that there's a 6% contingency, which is one of the requirements from MHFA, and it also makes sense from a business owner and developer. Our capital stack. In a capital stack, see, would you flip to the sources and uses? Thank you for doing this too, April. So the sources and uses, we come down with the project costs again, but then the developer is 20%, so roughly $1 million. First mortgage either coming from Platinum Bank in the Twin Cities or First Resource Bank in the Twin Cities. The Minnesota Housing Workforce Grant. The IRRB grant, again, for the infrastructure component. And when I spoke with Mark Phillips, the director up there, he got intrigued. You know how Mark is. He got intrigued, he got excited, all those things. And then he asked for all the detail work to happen with Chris. So that conversation needs to be completed. We went ahead and said, look, there's a shortfall that we're identifying of $284,000. And we need to value engineer what the term is, because the numbers don't work well enough unless we reduce the cost of this project by about $300,000. April, if you would hit the GC bid, please. Here's the numbers that came out of the three contractors that we looked at. We've chosen to use Johnson Wilson as our contractor in helping us streamline this project. And there's really four areas that we're diving into at a very, very great level. The rough framing number is out of line. Garden was way out of line. Okay, they had too many assumptions. But then Johnson Wilson also had some assumptions that we believe we can narrow down, as does Shane. Could you scroll down into? The other three pieces are the mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So again, remember that design build or design assist. We haven't hired an engineer for the contractors to go ahead and bid. And the firms that we talked to were still so busy that they said, here, push, this should work. A couple of guys acknowledged that it was a square foot number. We've done this before for $17.50 a square foot. Why don't you just use that for your preliminary numbers? Well, that doesn't work in real life. So these two numbers, or these two categories, mechanical and plumbing and electrical, are going to get, we're going to realize some savings and still have a very high quality building, but we're going to realize some savings because we're going to be dealing with real requirements. The last one, the site work package, is through the roof, almost $900,000. Admittedly, that includes grubbing and taking down the trees and doing the infrastructure and the sanitary and the sewer. But that's a lot of money. And again, it really is one of those things that we believe we can not easily achieve $300,000 of savings, but we're fairly confident that we can achieve that type of savings.
So effectively, you're looking to get about a 10% reduction on all of those numbers to get you close to where you're looking for. On those,
looking at it that way, yes.
On those you've identified.
Yes, on those categories, yeah. And I think it's going to be more like the excavation. It's going to be a higher proportion than the framing, but we'll see how it goes. That lumber, some of the guys also acknowledge that this lumber pricing that's been nuts has impacted some of their pricing, whether it should have or not. At this conceptual level, that's what they chose to do. So, I think there was a question.
I was just going to say site work could have some unknowns too, just with the rock.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah.
And also, when we put in the tank for the storm sewer, and when we put in the tank for the septic also. Talked about in Rob's presentation, you certainly understand that between the high costs, the limited rental rate environment of the area, the limited number of qualified subcontractors that have capacity to do additional work, and then just the difficulty in managing a process like this makes it difficult to do a new development. Hence, I'm here to ask you to consider this tax abatement request. The way we came up with our request was utilizing the information off the county's tax system or tax webpage. And again, it is both commercial and residential, and it's only the county component of that, those figures. What else can I?
What happens? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, what happens on year 17 and year 16, and that cash flow goes negative again? And so I'm just really curious about how, going forward beyond that, just what works there.
Well, that's an answer that we don't project out with any confidence.
Yeah.
And candidly, 16 years, I'm not confident either.
Right.
But we have to do that from a business planning and from the agencies. So by the time the year 16 comes, there will be realized $200,000 of cumulative net cash. And so however we need to modify our operations or deal with whatever the environment is at the time, we're still confident that the risking almost $1 million of equity isn't a lighthearted endeavor, and that the return will be achieved over time. the return is interesting too, so it's a twofold deal. So Joe Swanson is from Silver Bay. His brother's over in Two Harbors, so he loves the area. He's a strong supporter. The success of the business that he has acquired, the Surfside Enterprise, the Bluefin Enterprise, including Surfside, has been terrific. And so it's a combination of his love for the community, his realization that, he needs to do the retail to allow additional entrepreneurs to come in and conduct business, and then to offset some of the costs for the housing. That's where the question came in, or the conversation came in between he and Dennis, is, look, we're already talking about doing the retail. Let's offset some of the costs for the residential by doing this commercial. It does work in that philosophy, and there's still costs that have to be dealt with, and then techniques to try to reduce the impact to the users, the renters, and then also the reduce the risk to the developer, the owner.
Hey, I jumped by it.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry, can you go back to the commercial rent?
Good point.
How you came up with that for 6 retail spaces?
Yep. So the two inside ones that Joe would be talking about, so it's in the large building, the two here, that's projected at $15 a foot, and the rest of them are at $18 a foot. So between that, we came up with this.
Oh, okay, I see, that's,
So this is the whole revenue based on the mixed use nature. So we've broken it down first by the commercial, and then all the square footage of the various units to come up with this number coming to the front.
and we didn't get that spreadsheet, we only got the first little bit, so.
Which part?
Did you get the backup?
No. I mean, we got something,
Yeah.
but I mean, that whole thing.
Okay,
And
so,
actually, that was really hard to read because it was on 2 pages in my
Oh, no.
packet. And so,
Yeah,
that's why, I'm sorry,
It
that's
was
why
challenging to put that all into.
yeah, so that's why I'm just
Oh,
want
yeah.
to make sure I see this correctly.
yep. And I can leave my working copies with you.
Oh, good, because I like to read
Yep,
that.
yep.
So, yeah, so then when you get down to the taxes portion,
Yep.
the tax abatement portion, I was confused. Are you asking for $20,000 tax abatement, or is it 35? I was just,
So we're asking
Couldn't follow
for, the first year is 37.9, which comes from here.
okay.
So this is that wizard that was on the low, so it's 37.9 was the
That
county's.
number, okay,
County's
that's what you're
component.
asking.
Yep.
This is the residential, that's where, I wrote down residential portion, this is the commercial portion, okay.
Okay.
That's why I didn't figure that.
So we're still obligated to pay for the fiscal disparities,
Mhm.
the state component and the local taxing districts. But the request then is here. And then there was a anticipated 3% increase every year that takes us out from this point, the initial year one, all the way through. This aggregate then is at 938.
And your developer annualized return is not very good either.
No.
Actually, it's worse than his, way worse.
Yep. And, don't know the reasons, all the reasons. I know that the progress that we've made with competitively bidding, and this is a prevailing wage, which is important to us because of the granting potentials. This is numbers that we believe are accurate.
questions right now? I don't either.
No,
Oh,
I do.
yeah.
The square footage, retail square footage, I have no clue. How did you come up with those numbers?
We maximize the footprint of the existing buildings that were contemplated a couple of years ago. So we didn't want to change the size of the retail footings of the building footings.
Mm-hmm.
And then the reality of who can fit within that, we broke it into thirds. We had 4 over here on the big building, but then we took 2 of them. So they're, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to me if one of the demising walls shifts to give somebody 1,000 feet, and then the next person gets 4,000, or vice versa. So we put in these arbitrary, reasonable demising walls, but we believe on the whole, we'll achieve the $18 rents. And that's always...
And that's what I'm wondering, what is Lutzen, like Clearview, where, you know, those projects down there that we're renting, I guess, I have no clue what they were charging for square footage space or rents.
I can't say where, if Dennis spoke with somebody about that, but I know the charges that are happening with the Coho Bakery and some of the other retail space that Bluefin existing has is comparable.
Okay.
These also will be done, I call them a white envelope. So it's sheetrocked, taped, sanded, painted white, nice and clean. Somebody comes in and should they want to do a coffee shop, you know, restaurants are tough, but maybe restaurant, retail, doesn't matter. But they'll take it from there and complete the spaces.
Very good.
What other information can I dig into and find for you?
Very, very detailed.
Very
Appreciate all the information.
Okay, thank you. I do apologize about all the stuff that you had to weed through to...
No, I appreciate too much, then not enough.
Yeah, it's well said.
But I am excited to hear what Ellers has to say, because I did sit through that workshop. They presented about how they go about evaluating these projects, and they are certainly a lot smarter than me, so I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say.
Well, and frankly, Commissioner, I think they have more experience. I don't think.
I know. I don't have to figure all this out to
Yeah.
have it make sense to me.
So just as a unusual piece, let's see, we talked a little bit earlier, Commissioner, at the prior meeting, you talked about the American Rescue Funds. In addition to my work and things at home, I'm also involved with our city, so I'm the mayor of Oakdale. And I've been the mayor for 4 years already. Prior to that, as a councilor, 12 years before that. So the consideration that you're making about the potential for abatement, kind of regardless of the need, it's still a big deal. And it's still a really important decision that you're making. Joe and I have talked about, you know, boy, great project, cool project that Rob's developing. Ours is cool and great and needed. The hope is that there's enough ability of the county to say, you know what, we need to continue doing the tasks, the efforts to achieve the goals that we've laid out in front of us. Housing is a big one. You've talked about, Commissioner, about some other things that might be coming in the wings. I would encourage you to keep on using the tools wisely, of course, but keep on using the tools to meet the need countywide. Interesting in our conversations with Sarah at MHFA, she was surprised this year, you know, and Rob mentioned it, that the $2 million allotment from the legislature became $4 million this year, with the ability to use it all this year if there's a number of projects that are ready to roll. Ken, it wasn't confirmed, but I took between the lines that if there's not enough demand, then those roll over, and there's the ability for using the rest of the money in '23. But that was a cool deal to see, either by happenstance, the legislature didn't do it, or inadvertently omitted putting that restriction on to 2 million and 2 million in each year. But to be able to have the agency infuse that type of money into worthy projects, pretty cool.
It has been noted too with our housing deficit that it's a health concern. You know, we don't have a lot of street people that I know of, but I'm sure we have people who sleep in their cars, who might couch surf while they, work, and so it is a detriment.
Yes.
Our lack of housing.
Yes.
And so maybe some of the American Rescue Funds could be put toward
Yes.
that, the housing.
And so we don't know what we're going to, or in my community, we don't know what we're going to do yet with our allocation of the American Rescue Funds. The list has already been started. The good thing is that the requirements about how it's utilized are less than the first time around. So thank goodness for that. Our financial, so Ehlers, I'm familiar with them from cities. We switched recently to Baker Tilly as our bond counsel. And then between them and Kennedy Graven, all those guys are superb. So nice choice, whoever. I don't know if that's been a long time that you've had Ehlers, I call them Ehlers, in place, but.
About 4 years at the max.
Okay. Until you have to go do a rebid?
Yeah, Jeff oh yes, Jeff went right to them.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's
So
all I've ever known. So.
yeah,
Because they have, I guess they've worked with the city as well, so.
yes,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Again, thank you very much. And on behalf of Joe Swanson, Dennis Ristall, we appreciate being able to be here and have this conversation, and hopefully it'll look favorably on our two requests.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll leave this with you, and maybe.
She doesn't share well.
I'm taking my picture.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul, and, yeah, pleasure meeting you and getting the information here, and yeah, I'm pretty excited for both projects, and hope, I'm really curious both what Ellis has to say and what MHFA has to say, just how everything, because we don't have any experience navigating this and what criteria they use, and so we can like both projects all we want, and
Right.
and then it's not always what we like.
Right. And Rob, do you remember, when I'm thinking about MHFA conversations, I recall something being said that Cook County, Lake County even, but Lake not as much because of Duluth, but Cook County is looked on more favorably for some reason. And I don't recall, maybe you guys.
It's just
It's an opportunity zone.
Okay, maybe that's what it is.
Contingent on the board chair.
All the above.
I think it's due to being an opportunity zone designated by the state, so
Okay.
they're looking for ways to support the county.
Cool.
Great.
We're looking for their help.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful day.
You too. Thank you for scrolling through from that.
Remember, maybe we don't have to ask you guys to do it.
Oh, yeah. Well, moving on to item 3 here in the minutes, the Personnel Committee, which will be meeting at N1 here, not here, but we will.
On Teams.
On Teams, thank you, we have 1 o'clock today, and then otherwise, item 4 is adjournment, so we are adjourned.
All right, well done.
Does anyone want I thought we had